really important. I mean, it's interesting. Stories are really important in what we celebrate. And I know that Tom Quick has been a very controversial person who is, held up as being a great hero and actually was just.
Laurie, can I add one other thing? Is that
Sure.
this was really, in some ways, a reconciliation with the Quick family, that it's been a burden on them. This deification of their forefather, and in a couple of cases, they were very, very pleased, and it was like a real coming together of the community and the Quick family around moving on and moving on with the Native Americans.
I will just add that Milford and the columns, the Historical Society has opened several years ago, opened a very nice Native American room where there's some artwork and then on panels really tells the story of the Native Americans being moved out of the area.
Where is that?
In Milford. So this is this Milford is actually a good example of wanting to kind of repair some of the absolute awful behavior that has occurred in the name of America. Well, thank you all. Okay, so I can pass our basket around if we're very few here. Lord. Okay. Paying attention. Paying attention. There are times in my life, perhaps in yours, where someone has sternly admonished me to pay attention. Has that ever happened to you? Anybody told you got to pay attention? Pay attention. So it's an interesting phrase to listen, to watch, to consider something or someone very carefully. So, in order to kind of to introduce this topic and to kind of put your mind in a different place, I want to tell you the story by Leo Tolstoy, who is considered one of the finest authors of the 19th century, as a reflection on how to as a reflection on how or what we pay attention to. So this is called, maybe you know this story, but it's called the three questions. So once upon a time, there was a certain king. It occurred to him that he wanted to always know what the right time to begin everything is. And he wanted to know who the right people to talk to and listen to and who to avoid. And he always wanted to know what was the most important thing to do so that he would never fail in anything that he might undertake. So he proclaimed throughout his kingdom that he would give a great reward to anyone who would teach him what was the right time for every action, who was the most necessary people, and how he might know what is the most important thing to do. Now, many learned men came to the king, and they all answered his question differently. Some said that to know what the right time for every action is, you have to draw up in advance a table of the days and the months and the years, uh, so that you would know what the best time, and you have to live strictly according to that grid that you set out. Only thus, they said, could everything be done at the proper time. Others declared that it was impossible to decide beforehand the right time for every action, but that not letting oneself be absorbed in idle pastimes, one should always attend to everything that was going on and then do the most needful. Again, others again said that however attentive the king might be to what was going on, it was impossible for one man to decide correctly the right time for every action, but that he should have a council of wise men who would help him to fix the proper time for everything. And then there were others that said that some things could not wait to be laid upon a council, but which and about which one had at once to decide whether to undertake them or not. But in order to decide that, one must know beforehand what's going to happen. And it was only magicians who knew that, and therefore, in order to know the right time for every action, one must consult magicians. Equally various was the answer to the second question. Some people said that what the king most needed were his counselors, others the priests, others the doctors, while some said the warriors were the most necessary. To the third question as to what was the most important occupation, some replied that the most important thing was science, others said it was skill in warfare, and others, again, said it was religious worship. All the answers being different, the king agreed with none of them and gave the reward to none. But still wishing to get the right answers to his questions, he decided to consult a hermit, widely renowned for his wisdom. The hermit lived in a far off wood, and he received none but common folk. So the king put on a simple clothes, and before reaching the hermit's cell, dismounted from his horse and left his bodyguard behind, and he went on alone. When the king approached, the hermit was digging the ground in front of his hut. Seeing the king, he greeted him and went on digging. The hermit was frail and weak, and each time he struck his spade into the ground and turned a little earth, he breathed heavily. The king went up to him and said, I have come to you, wise hermit, to ask you to answer 3 questions. How can I learn to do the right thing at the right time? Who are the people I most need, and to whom I should therefore pay more attention to the rest? And the hermit listened to the king, but answered nothing. He just spat on his hand and kept on digging. You are tired, said the king. Let me do that. Let me have that slate, and I'll work a while for you. Thanks, said the hermit, and he gave the spade to the king, and he sat down on the ground. When he had dug 2 beds, the king stopped and repeated his questions. The hermit again gave no answer, but rose, stretched out his hand for the spade, and said, Now, you rest a while, and let me do the work. But the king didn't give him the spade and continued to dig. 1 hour passed and another, and the sun began to sink behind the trees, and the king at last stuck the spade in the ground and said, I came to you, wise man, for an answer to my questions. If you will give me none, tell me so, and I will return home. Here comes somebody running, said the hermit. Let us see who it is. So let's pause in our story and review what we have heard so far. We have a king who, in order to find the answer to pressing questions, takes off his royalty to seek out a hermit who only talks to common folks. I believe Tolstoy is making a political statement here that royalty and experts do not always have the answers. Additionally, there is an equality among people that supersedes rank and privilege. To compound this further, the king works as a laborer for the hermit, giving him what he needs in order to facilitate the hermit giving him what the king needs, which is the answer to his questions. So I think attention is deep in that there's a lot behind this simple story. And attention is shallow and wide as the king is being attentive to the hermit's simple needs. So let us continue with our story. The king turns around and sees a bearded man come running out of the woods. The man held his hands pressed against his stomach, and blood was flowing out from underneath them. When he reached the king, he fell fainting to the ground, moaning feebly. And the king and the hermit unfastened the man's clothing, and there was a large wound in his stomach. The king washed it as best he could and bandaged it with his handkerchief, but the blood did not stop flowing, and the king again and again removed the bandage, soaked with warm blood, and washed and re-bandaged the wound. When at last the blood ceased flowing, the man revived and asked for something to drink. The king brought him fresh water and gave it to him. Meanwhile, the sun had set and it became cool. So the king, with the hermit's help, carried the wounded man into the hut and laid him on the bed. Lying on the bed, the man closed his eyes and was quiet. The king was so tired with his walk and with all the work he had done that he crouched down on the threshold and also fell asleep, so soundly that he slept all through the summer's night. When he awoke in the morning, it was long before he could remember where he was or who was the strange bearded man lying on the bed and gazing intently at him with shining eyes. "Forgive me," said the bearded man in a weak voice when he saw the king was awake and was looking at him. "I do not know you and have nothing to forgive you for," said the king. "You do not know me, but I know you. I am that enemy of yours who swore to revenge himself on you because you executed his brother and seized his property. I knew you had gone alone to see the hermit, and I resolved to kill you on your way back. But the day passed and you did not return, so I came out of my ambush to find you, and I came upon your bodyguards, and they recognized me and wounded me. I escaped from them, but should have bled to death had you not dressed my wound. I wished to kill you, and you have saved my life. Now, if I live, and if you wish it, I will serve you as your most faithful servant and will bid my sons do the same. Forgive me." The king was very glad to have made peace with his enemy so easily and to have gained him for a friend, that he not only forgave him, but said he would send his servants and his own physician to attend to him, and promised to restore his property. Having taken leave of the wounded man, the king went out onto the porch and looked around for the hermit. Before going away, he wished once more to beg an answer to the questions he had put. The hermit was outside, on his knees, sowing seeds in the bed that the king had dug the day before. The king approached him and said, "For the last time, I pray you to answer my questions, wise man." "You have already been answered," said the hermit, still crouching on his thin legs and looking at the king who stood before him. Who answered? What do you mean? Asked the king. Do you not see? Replied the hermit. If you had not pitied my weakness yesterday, and had not dug those beds for me, but had gone your way, that man would have attacked you, and you would have repented for not having stayed with me. So the most important time was when you were digging the beds, and I was the most important man, and to do me good was your most important business. Afterwards, when the man ran to us, the most important time was when you were attending to him. For if you had not bound up his wounds, he would have died without having made peace with you. So he was the most important man, and what you did for him was your most important business. Remember then, there is only one time that is important. Now, it is the most important time because it is the only time when we have any power. The most necessary man is he with whom you are, for no man knows whether he will ever have dealings with anyone else. And the most important affair is to do him good, because for that purpose alone was man sent into this life. Thus ends our story. So, how do we pay attention? How do we listen and respond to what is in front of us? What is happening in the now? We need to watch what is going on around us and know that it is the people with whom we are that are the most important. Attention is deep and narrow. It is focused on the moment. But attention is also shallow and wide. It is the simple acts in our lives. It is shifting all of the time, and yet it is constant. Attention, paying attention, is applying ourselves in the moment to the task at hand. It is deep and it is simple. It is a paradox when we actually engage. I don't know about you, but much of the time I spend in distraction, paying it. Oftentimes, I've eaten half of my lunch before I've actually tasted anything because I am like all over the place. So, how would our days be if we were actually paying attention? Paying attention to the narrow and the deep, as well as the shallow and the wide. Those people, much wiser than me, might categorize this paying attention as being mindful. Those more disciplined might work on exercises that help focus our minds and pay attention to the small details around us. We need to be like the king and strip ourselves of our privilege and our rank. So much of our current public speech is noise, as was often the case in the 60s. And it just seems to reverberate in an echo chamber between people or groups. And there sure doesn't seem to be a whole lot of listening or reflecting going on in some important quarters. I really do worry about this state of affairs. But in this time of intense change and hypercharged advances, it is said that our ability to focus, to concentrate, and pay attention is shortening. But in order to be effective in our fractured world, we need to be ever more mindful. We need to move beyond our conditioned response and our measured and mitigated sense of entitlement. Paying attention is both deep and narrow. It connects us to the deep mysteries of the world, concepts of meaning and connection. And paying attention is shallow and wide, and it connects us to the simple rhythms of our life, the ordinary, everyday occurrences that keep us rooted in the present. And paying attention gets us out of our habitual patterns where we dismiss people and ideas out of hand that, if we were actually to consider them, might open us up to a different connection to each other. So I invite you to ponder the complexity of Leo Tolstoy's three questions. Three questions that might seem on the surface to be simple and wide, and yet is the work of one of the greatest authors, the author of War and Peace and Anna Karenina. It is no simple story. This is the questioning that begs our attention. Open hearted, open minded, narrow, deep, shallow, and wide. So in your days ahead, may you pay attention to all that comes your way and allow it to shape the choices as you move attentively through your day. And like the king who had to shed his royalty and his privilege to toil in the garden of the wise, may the questions that knock at your consciousness become more clear when you pay attention. Deep, wide, deep and narrow, shallow and wide. It's both and always. May it be so. So how's your attention these days? Are you scattered? Do you forget what you're doing when you go from one room to the next? I always return back to the same room and then I can remember what I was supposed, where I was going. Any comments?
I had not heard that story of the king. It's a good story. Um, there was a quotation by Kurt Vonnegut that, we're here to help each other get through this thing, whatever it is. I thought of that as you were telling the story. That quotation, Dan Brinkerhoff is a local artist, some of you may know him, but he used to do, or I think he still does, stone engravings. And he engraved my father's memorial stone. I honestly don't know whose idea it was to put that quote on the stone, but it was an appropriate quote.
So at this time when I was in Vermont last weekend at my dad's, and I don't, when I'm home, I don't have television reception. We do have a television. We have Netflix. We're watching, like any number of series, on streaming, but we don't have regular news. You know, it's meet the press, and oh my goodness. So at any rate, I saw uh, television and the news last weekend, and I was just yelling at the TV. And my father just looked at me and said, "Good thing you don't have one," which was really true. But I wondered if there's anything in in this concept about the now and doing what you can be doing, and that kind of mindfulness that helps anybody get through this time, or is this time just a grit your teeth and hope for the best and or work for the best? Any comments? I mean, is there any?
I do.
Okay, go for it.
So to talk about not having a straight line to what you're doing, I thought it was old age. But maybe it happens just because our minds are very busy and challenged with everything that's going on. But I really don't care about it because I just go from one thing to another and lose where I was, but pick up someplace else. But in the end, if I've accomplished all the things I wanted to accomplish, I don't care in what order it happens. I just leave something and then say, oh, I was doing that. I go back and finish that one. And then I walk around someplace and I say, oh, I didn't finish that, and I finish it. The one thing that I think is helpful at this time is to apply yourself, for me, in any way I can, to make at least myself feel that I'm doing something, at least do. Michelle Obama said, do something, and I took it to heart. I feel a lot better, although I'm with people constantly that are just pulling their hair out of their head because we're all quite concerned, especially where we are here in Northampton County, which is a really serious place to be and try to get people voting democratically. So, but I have been very busy. And so I just feel like at least I am going to reach somebody. I'm writing postcards. I'm being a driver for hundreds and hundreds of people are coming into the area to canvass. I am canvassing myself. I am dropping off literature. I am going to meetings. So, and when you're there, you're speaking with people and it makes them feel better also that you're there as a support system. Is the same way that I feel about our fellowship. If we don't show up, then we're not really being very supportive. But if we do show up, it makes a difference for all the people that are there. And I just feel like just stepping up to the plate in any fashion at this time or any time is a good thing. Just be there, show up and do something. And I don't know if it has anything to do with the story because I really couldn't hear the story very well. Something is wrong with the audio this week. But that's what I have to say about something.
Anyone else want to weigh in?
Sometimes I feel that just following a stream is paying attention. In other words, not having a goal or not thinking about paying attention, but just following where you are and where you are going. Before retirement, I had an incredibly busy job and that required 100% attention to what was in front of me. And I'm just in awe about not having to do that pay attention thing because I'm really paying attention. Sometimes and I totally get the other side too, but sometimes that just is an incredible place. Wow, I'm going to pick those tomatillos, or that's what I need to do right now. Or
Anyone else have anything to say? Okay. Well, our closing words is by Jacob Trapp. It's called Ordinary Miracles. Simply to be and to let things be as they speak wordlessly from the mystery is what they are, of what they are. Simply to say a silent yes to the hillside flowers, to the trees we walk under, to pass from one person to another a morsel of bread, and answering yes. This is the simplest, the quietest of sacraments. Well, I thank you all for being here and for participating. We'll extinguish the chalice. So we extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth and the power of commitment. These we hold in our hearts and make manifest in the world until we are together again.
Thanks, Laurie, for filling in. You're a trooper.
You are all the most important people to me right this instant.
Nice job, Lord. Thank you.
Thanks, Rudy, for all those comments and suggestions for how we can really become more aware of everything that's going on around us.
Well, the Tom Quick story at Milford is just really phenomenal. The mayor wanted to do something. He didn't know what. And where the obelisk was in the middle of one of the streets honoring Tom Quick, the obelisk was moved to the Columns Museum. And they had a ceremony, and they brought in Lenny Lenape from Oklahoma and Wisconsin, and they were dispersed as far west as Oregon. I grew up in Delaware County, Indiana. Lenny Lenape moved there. And where the obelisk was, they had a ceremony where they buried the hatchet in the middle of the street. It was really, really quite something.
Yeah. All righty.
There's such an interesting thing. Selected microphone.